Welcome once again to Rowdy Time, and we're back just following a series where, I'll admit it, the Rangers simply endured and survived against the Angels. They were just a few outs away from at least losing 3 of the 4 games, but instead put on perhaps the biggest comeback of the season, rallying from down 7-1 to win 11-10 in 10 innings. They then followed that up by beating the Angels by almost the same score that they lost the first game by, 15-9. So yeah, their pitching wasn't as good as we've come to expect these past few years, bringing back flashbacks to how they used to play back in the late 90s, but the flip side is that the offense has finally clicked back into shape, as they almost scored as many runs this series that they did for the entire month of July. The bottom line is that the Angels made up no ground in this series. The Rangers still hold a 5-game lead in the West, and it looks like the schedule is going to finally get easier for the next month. They're in Kansas City now, with upcoming games against the struggling Red Sox, the Orioles, and the Twins. Last month was a challenge, and it saw quite a few fans decide to jump off the bandwagon and into panic rooms, but that once again showed how little some people know about baseball in this area. The Rangers are still tied for the best record in the American League, so I'd say rumors of their demise are disgustingly exaggerated. The trade deadline has also passed, and even though the Rangers pulled one out at the last minute to get Ryan Dempster, there are still fans wishing they'd done more, selling the entire farm to get Cliff Lee again, or outbidding the Angels for Greinke. Well, those trades don't always work out very well, and to demonstrate, I'm going to present my first list on Rowdy Time, giving you what I believe are the worst trades in baseball history. Keep in mind, these are trades, player for player, so moves like the Red Sox selling Babe Ruth don't count. So here we go, the 5 worst trades in baseball history. Number 5. Frank Robinson was one of the anchors of the Cincinnati Reds in the early 1960s, winning MVP in 1961. But just before the 1966 season, the Reds traded him to the Baltimore Orioles for Milt Pappas, Jack Balscom, and Dick Simpson. Reds management claimed the reason for the trade was they felt Robinson was, quote, an old 30. Others have since speculated that management no longer wanted an opinionated black man on the team. In any case, Robinson's 66 season made the Reds look like fools. He won the Triple Crown in guiding the Orioles to the pennant and then a sweep of the Dodgers in the World Series. With Robinson, Baltimore would make the series 4 times in 6 years. When his name came up for Hall of Fame induction, he chose his plaque to depict him wearing an Orioles cap. This one's at the bottom of the list because the Reds did not suffer very long after the trade. By 1970, they had assembled what would become known as the Big Red Machine. They would go on to the World Series 4 times in the 70s. Though as one final twist of the knife, they lost that first series in 1970 to Robbie's Orioles. Number 4. In 1990, the Boston Red Sox were headed to the postseason for the 3rd time in 5 years. But they felt they needed to strengthen their bullpen to finally get over the hump, so they pulled a deal with Houston to get Larry Andersen. One of the players they sent to the Astros was a minor league infielder, Jeff Bagwell. Andersen did post a 1.23 ERA in 15 games with Boston, but the Red Sox once again were swept by Oakland in the playoffs, and Andersen was gone after that year. Bagwell, meanwhile, would make the major leagues with the Astros and hit 449 home runs with more than 1,500 RBI in 15 years in Houston, where along with scrappy second baseman Craig Biggio, he formed one of the best infield combinations in the game. If there is any small consolation in this, it's that the Red Sox finally overcame their so-called curse and won the World Series in 2004, 1 year before Bagwell and the Astros made the series for the first time ever. Number 3. I really didn't want to mention this one, but I guess I can't avoid it. In 1989, the Texas Rangers were looking for some kind of spark to push them forward. Getting nothing out of the designated hitter spot, they worked a deal to get Harold Baines from the Chicago White Sox, sending shortstop Scott Fletcher along with prospects Wilson Alvarez and Sammy Sosa. Baines was a bust for Texas. Hobbled by bad legs and seeming to exude an attitude that he didn't want to be there, Baines only drove in 60 runs in 153 games before the Rangers dealt him to Oakland almost exactly a year later. This one's a twofer because the Sox ended up doing the exact same thing with Sosa that the Rangers did, sending him as part of a package to the crosstown Cubs for George Bell. Bell did drive in 112 runs in 1992 for the Sox, but he dropped off to 64 the next year and retired. Sosa's numbers remain clear. 609 home runs for his career, with 545 of them with the Cubs, including 66 in the big home run chase of 1998 and 63 the following year. While many have since claimed those records to be tainted, the excitement he generated at the time and the despair of the two teams that could have had it can't be disputed. Number 2. The New York Mets of the late 1960s were known for their young pitching talent, but with a rotation that included the likes of Tom Seaver and Jerry Koosman, it appeared that the young Nolan Ryan was the odd man out in getting enough playing time to hone his craft. Looking to fill a hole at third base they'd had since their inception, the Mets sent Ryan to the California Angels for Jim Fregosi. Fregosi never hit better than .234 in less than 2 seasons with the Mets before being dealt to the Rangers. Ryan, meanwhile, being given the ball every 4th game with the Angels, evolved into one of the most intimidating and dominating pitchers of his time. He led the league in strikeouts 7 times in 8 years with the Angels, and 4 more times with the Astros and Rangers combined. His final totals in 27 years? 324 wins, 5,714 strikeouts, and 7 no-hitters, with 295 wins, 5,221 strikeouts, and all no-hitters coming after his departure from New York. But the number 1 worst trade is... In the 1950s, the Cleveland Indians were one of the few threats against the mighty New York Yankees. They were the only team to finish ahead of the Yanks twice in that decade, including winning the 1954 pennant with a record 111 wins. And while he was not a part of that team, Rocky Colavito became the tribe's most popular player in the late 50s, hitting more than 40 home runs in both 58 and 59. But Indians management always felt that Colavito's strikeouts hurt the team more than his homers helped. After several attempts to get him to cut back on his swing, including offering bonuses if he hit less than 30 homers in a year, they traded him just as the 1960 season started to Detroit for reigning batting champion Harvey Kuhn. Indians general manager Frank Lane declared that they had traded Hamburger for steak. What they really got was a singles hitter whose average dropped 45 points from the previous year and only drove in 54 runs in his lone season with Cleveland. while Colavito averaged 107 RBI in 4 seasons with Detroit, including 140 in 1961. This turned out to be just the biggest of many bad deals the Indians made over the next few years, including dealing Norm Cash to the same Tigers team. And they suffered as a franchise big time. The Indians would not see the World Series again until 1995, finishing in double digits out of first place every year from 1960 to 1993, fielding some of the worst teams in baseball history in that time span. Ironically, the Detroit GM that took Colavito was the same one who traded Frank Robinson as GM of the Reds, Bill DeWitt, who had only this to respond to Lane's hamburger quote, "I like hamburger." So those are my picks for the 5 worst trades in baseball history. Debate and discussion on this is always open, but hopefully one way or the other, it'll help people realize that sometimes the best deals are the ones you don't make. Stay rowdy, my friends.